Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation called EFL Vocabulary Learning Strategy Studies Conducted in Turkey, a Systematic Review. My name is Ezgi Balkan and I am a PhD student at Türkiye University. Introduction part. Vocabulary knowledge is essential for language learning and it was considered as the heart of language acquisition. According to Harmer, language structures can resemble skeleton of language when vocabulary represents vital organs and flesh. Likewise, Kreshon asserted that language learners carry their dictionaries instead of grammar books when they are traveling. On the other hand, vocabulary was ignored in the past and it was seen as a substitution for other skills. Thanks to the appearance of lexical approach and communicative language teaching, vocabulary has gained momentum after that. In the foreign language context, vocabulary learning process is highly demanding. Also, language learners need a gradual process to acquire vocabulary items. This procedural demand may pose some significant obstacles. Regarding learner-centered classrooms and digital realms, researchers have attempted to explore how vocabulary has learned by many of the foreign language learners. As a subset of language learning strategies, vocabulary learning strategies have been proposed by many researchers for alleviating the learning burden. According to Oxford, vocabulary learning strategies make the learning process faster, more efficient, and easier. So when it comes to the significance of the study, the previous research on the vocabulary learning strategies underlined that the good and less proficient language learners, while some of the studies explored the impact of strategy use. In general sense, many studies focused on the efficiency of the vocabulary learning strategy used among EFL learners. According to Schmidt, each context highlighted its own results and context. So, there is still necessity for uncovering the strategy preferences for Turkish EFL learners to provide useful implications from the master's and doctoral thesis in Turkey. Thus, this systematic review aimed to address the research gap by exploring the following question. The first research question indicates that which vocabulary learning strategies are the most frequently used. The second research question, which vocabulary learning strategies are the least frequently used? And the last research question deals with what are the challenges students experience in vocabulary acquisition. In terms of methods, this systematic review aimed to find the studies related to Turkish EFL participants' vocabulary learning strategy preferences. A successful systematic review consists of some aspects such as transforming and identifications of unknown to known for answerable inquiries via explicit instruction for participants, treatments, and findings according to the PRISMA preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis criteria. So, in the table 1, we put the inclusion criteria first. When we look at the inclusion criteria, our research focus related to vocabulary learning strategies in the English as a foreign language content. And as we mentioned, the data source, the master's and doctoral thesis from the National Thesis Center of Turkey. In terms of the publications, we focused on the ELT departments, English language, and also literature as the master's and doctoral thesis. In terms of the publications, it should be freely accessible online and the content exclusively with Turkish EFL learners in Turkey. So we just add the language, only English written ones. In terms of the specificity, the addressing the research questions include. In table 2, we exclude some criteria functions such as the publication type. We exclude the publications if they are not thesis. Access restriction, no open access studies were excluded again. In terms of the location, if the study is carried out with other countries, as we mentioned outside of Turkey, we exclude this part. In terms of the educational setting, we focused on the EFL context, so the studies are based on non-EFL contexts or topics or other language contexts such as Turkish as a foreign language or the other languages. We eliminate these studies. In terms of the content, again, we exclude the publications related to Department of Educational Science and other English lessons as well. So we put forward non-English written thesis as the elimination criteria. And also we look to information related to whether they are addressing the research questions or not. So while we are collecting our data, the data were derived from the Turkish National Thesis Center, as we named YÖKTEZ in Turkey, in December 2025. According to Prisma guidelines, the key strings was identified as vocabulary learning strategies at first. After that, the eligibility criteria were established. To provide a rationale behind the inclusiveness and exclusiveness criteria to have unbiased analysis, the Prisma flowchart also illustrated. In December 2025, we almost found 102 studies related to vocabulary learning strategies. After that, the archival database was screened through the abstracts, including some key strings, Turkish EFL participants, EFL context, studies conducted in Turkey with Turkish EFL students. After that, we eliminate the thesis whether they are written other languages or other contexts. The last search was done by filtering the answering the research gaps and research questions, as we mentioned, the most used strategies, the last used strategies among the content of the research. After that, we found 30 relevant studies according to the Department of English Language Teaching. Eventually, we found that there were 28 master theses and 2 doctoral theses that we include in the systematic review. As you see in the figure 1, the Prisma flow process indicates that we eliminate and also we screen the data, and at the end we include the studies in the review part as the 30 as we mentioned, and also in the chart we also add the reports excluded as 72 with their reasons. As we mentioned, the first reason, not address the research questions, and the studies were 29. The second reason focused on the participants, they were not Turkish EFL learners or they were related with other languages, and the number of these studies were 30. The third reason, no open access. And the last 4 reason, the publications were written in Turkish and they were 80. So when we look at the data analysis, we included studies according to codes. We labeled the codes study 1, study 2, and to promote the data objectivity and reduce potential bias. Through using these codes, we provide the unbiased and anonymity of the sources. So we use the content analysis to prove publicly open access database, and also data collection process was narrowed down with using key search strings. In terms of the validity and reliability, the study minimized potential errors through a replicable process and also exploration. The data selection and collection phase was controlled using the Prisma inclusiveness and also exclusiveness criteria. The findings were controlled twice during and after coding the interpretation. So, in terms of the findings, we focused on the different taxonomies and the association between vocabulary learning strategies and learners' proficiency, and also frequency of use among Turkish EFL learners. And we found that this was differentiated by the age group of the learners and their own context. The findings reveal that 30 theses covered the commonly used and infrequently used strategy types as well as vocabulary challenges in language learning structure. These studies highlighted that the majority classified strategies by using Schmidt's taxonomy and also in Turkish context Kocaman Kızılkaya Cumalıoğlu scale. Many of the studies employed a quantitative research design and also mixed method research design. On the other hand, a limited number of studies work on qualitative aspects of strategy preferences. So, Turkish EFL learners were medium users who tended to use simple and more mechanical strategies such as memory and determination strategies. They preferred determination strategies such as dictionary use, guessing from context, analyzing parts of the speech and affixes, checking for elven cognates, and using visual cues. In contrast, memory strategies focus on the connections with synonyms, antonyms, or coordinates and personal experience by using physical action, semantic mapping, group words, and also the keyword method. In turn, the learners were insufficient in use social strategy, especially they preferred asking the teacher for word structure and their classmates for meaning, but the social strategies were the least prevalent part in the bulk of the studies. So, referring to the third research question, the studies emphasize that some challenges in vocabulary learning, such as including the meanings of the words, written or spoken utterances, the length of the words, spelling and also pronunciations of the words, and also the Turkish EFL learners tended to forget the vocabulary and they focused on the lack of retention of vocabulary items. So the Turkish EFL learners also focused on the psychological readiness for learning a language and they express that they can have some negative feelings such as having a fear or anxiety while speaking and also trying to find the appropriate vocabulary in the context. So, in the discussion part, when we reviewed the existing literature, we found that the Turkish EFL learners were medium users of the vocabulary learning strategies as well. Aligning with the existing literature, the Turkish EFL learners prefer determination strategies such as using dictionaries, inferring from the context, analyzing parts of the speech, and highly prefer such strategy was checking for the L1 cognates among learners. Also, studies highlighted that memory strategy use was prioritized among Turkish EFL learners. Consistent with the relevant studies, the least prevalent strategy used was social strategy preferences among the Turkish EFL learning context. Similarly, researchers exemplified some of the significant hurdles as the meaning of the words, their length of the words, and spelling, writing, and pronunciation similarly. As the conclusion part, we can conclude that this systematic review synthesized the findings from the master's and doctoral dissertations in the National Thesis Center of Türkiye regarding vocabulary learning strategy use. Based on the first research question, it was found that determination and the memory strategies were found to be the most preferred strategies. The second research question emphasized that the least prevalent strategy use was the social strategy use, and the Turkish EFL learners employ social strategies the least. The general findings display that the persistent finding related the frequency of using strategies with other studies as well. Remarkably, the Turkish EFL language learners were more likely to use more mechanical strategies as intuitive habits, considering memory and determination strategies. Learners also found that English vocabulary difficult due to its length, difficulty in pronunciation, spelling, writing, remembering, and also deciphering its meaning from the context. Besides, their own perspectives may impact their learning process as they thought that they had an inadequate vocabulary repertoire and they were incapable of recalling the words. So, as the conclusion part, we can say that vocabulary learning strategy used in terms of the thesis, there are some difficulties that we encounter for language learners, and also we can find the similar results in terms of the context of Turkish EFL learners. Still, we have some the mechanical use of language strategies, and also some of the parts the learners can avoid the use of social strategies as we commonly see in that part. So this is the end of our presentation.